I was raised in Warren, Ohio on the west side. And we were in the area called West Lawn over there. It was one of the roughest parts of Warren. And my brothers were kind of the roughest guys at school. And so I was raised around a lot of teasing and a lot of... my father was German, and we were expected not to show a lot of emotion. We were supposed to be tough guys, all of us. And so when I was about 7 years old, I had been real close to my grandmother, and she passed away. And I remember my dad was sitting next to me at the funeral, and he was looking at me like, waiting to see if I was going to cry or not. He didn't appreciate that kind of stuff. And there wasn't any emotion in our family. We didn't show emotion or anything. And so I sat there, and I remember there was a bulletin there, and it had Jesus' picture on it. I never saw anything like it because we never went to church. And then there was a 23rd Psalm, and I sat there, and I kept reading it so I wouldn't cry. And all of a sudden, it felt like somebody put their arms around me, hugged me. And I felt the presence of God. I wasn't a Christian. And the Lord put his arms around me. And I never forgot that feeling. There was years of it. And, this went on, and, God led me into a cleaning service, and I had a janitorial business for some 20 years. But, all of a sudden, I started losing my satisfaction for my business. And I was making good money and everything. I had all the nice stuff. And God was like, had me in a box, like calling me. I don't know how to explain it, but he had me like separate. And he was talking to me. And I'm sitting there, and I'd go to Perkins, and I just felt like I was the only one in the room, and the Lord was talking all these scriptures to me. And, the Lord spoke to me about being a repair of the breach and a restore of the old waste places for people to dwell in. And I was like, what is this about? And, out of the blue, I get a call, and it's a gentleman over in a mission over in Warren. And he said, Mr. Gilger, I had a heart attack, and I run the Open Door Mission, and God told me that you're supposed to take over the mission. Well, I had been feeling like a year. I had had all this going on. And God was telling me, I'm drying your book up. I'm moving you on.
Did he know you?
The gentleman only met me one time, and how he got my number, I don't even think I was in the phone book. But he looked me up. Well, you know what happened? I never got a chance to talk to the guy, and he passed away 2 weeks later. And his sister-in-law, she got the property off of him. She calls me up, and she goes, I know the Lord wants you to have this property, and he wants you to be the executive director. And she goes, I'd like to sell you the property for $100,000. So I says, well, I don't think that's going to happen. But I says, you know what? I really have a heart for all these people I'm seeing around in the park, laying on the bench and under the bridge. And I said, my heart's breaking for those people, and I've been praying with them and stuff. On my lunch break, I go down to the parks and pray with them. So you know what happened? Every time I rode by, the place was pulling on me like a magnet. It was just tugging at me. And it was a real terrible, beat-up old little mission, Why I wanted to go there doesn't make sense. But you know what? I just kept driving by there. And finally, I told my wife, I says, I can't take this anymore. I said, God's told me he's calling me out. And I said, let's go over there and pray. So we went over and we walked around there. And I said, honey, you know what? What if God wants me to do that? Would you be willing to give up some things? Because we had 7 kids. And to do this means no benefits, no paycheck, no nothing. And we got down on our knees we walked around that property, and we got on our knees, and I said, Lord, if you have this lady call me, tell me this property's free, and then I'll quit my jobs, and I'll give up everything, and I'll step out on faith and do this ministry. Wow. So the next day, I'm home, I'm making a sandwich, and the phone rings. And Mrs. Blackburn's on the phone, and she goes, Mr. Gilger, I've been up all night, and I am miserable, and the Lord told me I have to give you my property for free. Oh. So I'm like, now that sounds pretty nice, but my foot was in 2 miles because all of a sudden I don't have a paycheck. And my wife and me went gulp, and it was pretty, But I knew that the fact that it was the next day told me that it was going to happen. So we went, and I got a quick claim deed right away from that lady. And I went down there, and I quit my job, and I went in the place, and I took a chair in there and set it in the middle of the floor, and I prayed. And I was like, and that's all I knew to do, because there wasn't anything there to work with. I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden, this guy knocks on the door, and he has a hobo with him already. And he goes, here's a guy, he's been in the woods for 2 years, and I'm telling you, he's got I don't know how to explain it, he's been going in his pants for like 2 years, looks like. And he smells like it smelled like a toilet walked in the door. And he's got hair thick like a sheep or something, with manure in his hair and everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you trying to do to me, Lord? I was about ready to run out the door and lock it. He said, well, we tried Youngstown everywhere. No one will take this guy. And he said, this is Thanksgiving, and if you'll take him. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be down here 24 hours a day. So I brought a mattress down there, and I took that guy. And he laid on the mattress for 4 days, hallucinating, seeing elephants and everything else. And then finally he woke up, and he came to his mind, and we sat there, and we ate together. And I says, well, what happened to you in your life? And he says, well, my wife, she took off with a truck driver. And he says, I've been living in the woods ever since for 2 years. And I says, well, what do you do? And he says, I'm a master plumber and carpenter. Okay? I almost killed my blessing. I wanted to throw him out of there after 4 days. I couldn't take it. So I said, well, let's get you cleaned up. So I got him all cleaned up, and I gave him a hammer, and the guy stayed there for a whole year, and he was our first graduate. And he built the whole place. It grew in miraculous ways that I cannot explain, because we outgrew the first place in 2 years. And I had 24 people living in 12 bed space. I had mattresses between all the beds. And we had our board meeting, and they said, you know what, we got to go get a school building or something. This thing's going to be really big, and there's so much help needed around here. So you know what, I want to buy this school on Elm Road, and the Lord spoke to me to pull over. I don't know how to explain this thing. It's just a feeling. It isn't a voice telling you. So I pulled over, and I walked around the place a few times, and I felt the Lord tell me, there's your building. And another guy had a children's ministry in the Elm Road school. I didn't say a word to the guy, anything, and I just walked around there. Well, I'm sitting at my desk about 2 weeks later, and I had the phone number for the Warren City Schools, and I was going to see if I could purchase Dickey Avenue School. And here comes a white-haired gentleman in, and he goes, I'm Pastor Sprague, and the Lord spoke to me. He said to tell you that I'm supposed to give you my building. So I said, what building? He says, Elm Road School. Well, this has happened several buildings in a row. Wow. We have 5 buildings now, and it kept happening. Wow. Well, we filled every one of these buildings up. And this happened only 6 months ago. I had been driving by a place by the mall on 422 for a straight year. And every time I went by, I felt a tug about this one certain building. And felt the Lord had that building for us for our giving away clothing and food. I never said anything to anybody. I never told anybody. I just kept parking the car and praying. And I said, Lord, I'm going to end it right now. I'm not going to pray about it. If you want me to have it, then have this guy get a hold of me and tell me he's going to give it to me. So you know what? I felt like I should go in the jewelry store about 6 months ago, and I pulled in. A gentleman from Pleasant Valley owns a jewelry store. And a Jewish gentleman walks up to me, and he's all dressed up, and he goes, you know what? I ought to just give you that building. So I go. I thought he wasn't talking to me, so I keep talking to this guy. He goes, hey, taps me. He goes, I ought to just give you that building. So I go, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, Burke Building over on 422. That was the building I was praying for. So we got the building now. So I'm like, I get blown away by God, you know. I'm like, I don't have no talent to do this. He just tells me pull over and pray.
Hey, Chris.